Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Namo Buddhaya, Om Swastiastu, salam kebajikan untuk kita semua. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the technical training on the IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards in this beautiful island, Bali. Ladies and gentlemen, this training is held to promote corporate sustainability disclosures as a priority recommendation on the roadmap for Asian sustainable capital markets. It is also a platform of collaboration between ASEAN Capital Market Forum and the International Sustainability Standards Board to disseminate and build capacity on the ISSB standards amongst the ASEAN regulators, corporates, investors communities, and other stakeholders. Now, I'd like to introduce and greet first Chief Executive of Capital Markets and Financial Derivatives and Carbon Exchange Supervisors, concurrently acting as chairs of the ACMF 2023, Mr. Inarno Jayadi, along with the officials of OJK, welcome Bapak. Board member of the International Sustainability Standard Boards, Mr. Ping Long, welcome. Head of delegates from SEC Myanmar, from SEC Philippines, and Monetary Authority of Singapore, and also SEC Vietnam. I'd also like to introduce and greet Senior Director, Finance Sector Office, Asian Development Bank. Welcome. Chief Executive Officer, Sustainability Finance Institute of Asia. And also all speakers, Jen Stam, Jonathan Bravo, Jonathan Lebre, and Charles Malloy. Welcome. Last but not least, all delegates from the ACMF member countries, representative of the Indonesian Financial Services Authority, and of course, all of you training participants, both in person and in virtual, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We are opening today's agenda with the welcoming address by board member of the International Sustainability Standard Board. Please welcome Mr. Ping Len. Please, Bapak.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And sorry, I cannot mention your names one by one, but actually, I have to say it's a pleasure, it's an honor, it's a privilege to be invited to join you here today and to address some common interest issues. And firstly, I need to express my what I feel here when I join you on first day at the meeting of chairs, and what I feel from the second day's sessions, conference. It's sort of quite like I used to experience in my early days. When I served at Ministry of Finance China, it's quite similar. Make me feel very, very recall me quite a lot of very valuable memories. At that time, it's the early days of so-called convergence between the Chinese accounting standards and the international accounting standards. And I think in 2005, in autumn 2005, we spent almost half a year to discuss with colleagues from IASB on every reporting issues, almost every requirement from IAS. Try to explore whether it is applicable to in Chinese market. I think that's the very important basis for both you and us. That's why we signed a protocol to enhance our cooperation and coordination. It's not only related to any potential adoption in ASEAN countries, but also to enhance the engagement from this region to help us to improve our standards, to make it a truly global baseline. So we are delivering in accordance with the protocol. We are delivering workshops, educational sessions, and participation to your important events, annual events by board members, by our senior staff. So I try to be short. Finally, I'd like to say I'm really honored to be here, to be the one to sign the protocol on behalf of IFRS Foundation with an important partner of ours, ACMF. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy your discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ping Lem, for the welcoming address. Next, we will hear the opening speech that will be delivered by Chief Executive of Capital Markets, Financial Derivatives, and Carbon Exchange Supervisor, Chair of the ACMF 2023. Please welcome Bapak Inarno Jayadi. Yeah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and best wishes to all of us. ADB, Ms. Christine Engstrom, good morning. Ms. Jane and Ms. Abigail from Monetary Authority of Singapore, morning, AB. Speakers from ISSB, Mr. Jonathan Bravo, Mr. Jonathan Labre, and Mr. Jarlas Molloy. My fellow regulators from Asian jurisdictions and also all participants who have joined today in person and also virtually. It is a pleasure to be with all of you here today and greet you in person. I would like to express my gratitude to God Almighty for the blessing that we have allowed us to gather here today for the technical training on the IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards. This is the second training organized by ACMF-ISSB in 2023. Following the first one held in Singapore on 28th June 2023. First and foremost, I would like to extend my thanks to the ACMF Secretariat, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, the International Sustainability Standard Board, ISSB, and the Asian Development Bank for their collaboration in organizing this technical training. We will have two training sessions today. The morning session will be dedicated to regulators, while the afternoon session will be for corporate preparers. Ladies and gentlemen, these days, investors and other stakeholders face challenges when they try to access good quality and globally comparable sustainability information. This is due to each jurisdiction has its own local standards with different international references. Despite making things more difficult, those aforementioned challenges shows that sustainability reports have become more popular and more important for stakeholders in making better decisions. In late June 2023, the ISSB launched IFRS S1 and IFRS S2. These standards are a significant development for global sustainability reporting. And for the first time, we have a global baseline for sustainability disclosures that is comprehensive, reliable, and comparable. IFRS S1 and IFRS S2 provide a reliable source of information about the sustainability-related risk and opportunity of companies. This information can help regulators and other stakeholders to develop policies and initiatives that support sustainable development. I'm confident that IFRS S1 and IFRS S2 will play a major role in promoting sustainable business practices and supporting the transition to a more sustainable economy. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished training participants, since its launch in June 2023, many countries and the ISSB have made significant development for IFRS S1 and IFRS S2. Yeah. During today's session, we'll learn about those developments. More specifically, through the sharing session and discussion, we'll be able to learn about the jurisdictional journeys toward those standards adoption and ISSB development since the publication of the standards. I believe that this training will enrich and equip us with valuable information that we can apply when we return to our respective countries. Furthermore, I strongly urge all ACMF members to participate actively in this training program and gain as much knowledge as possible. This knowledge can be then used as a reference to implement the standards for developing sustainable report or policies in your respective jurisdictions. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I will end my opening remarks here. I'm hoping for a fruitful training and productive discussion ahead. Wishing you all enjoyable time in Bali. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Bapak Inarno. Please stay on the stage as we will have a photo sessions. Okay, for the first photo session, I'd like to invite Mr. Pinglong, Mr. Maung Maung Win, Mr. Kevin Lesterly, Ms. Abigail, Ms. Fan Huai An, and Ms. Yunita Lindasari. Please on the stage for the first photo session. Okay, look at the camera. Let me count 1, 2, 3. One more time, please give the best smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Thank you so much. While Bapak Inarno and Mr. Ping Lang and Bu Yunita on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, you may return to your seat, please. Bapak Inarno, Mr. Ping Lang, and Bu Yunita, please on the stage. Yes. We will have another photo session. Okay. I'd like to invite Mr. Jarlath Molloy, Mr. Jonathan Bravo, Mr. Jonathan Labre, Mr. Eugene Wong, Mr. Afiro Louis Amatong, Miss Christine Engstrom, Mr. Hoirul Ridwan Kudus, and also Miss Novira Indria Ningrum. Please be on the stage. Okay, ready everyone? Look at the camera in 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. For the third photo sessions, we will do it on the floor together with all participants. So please return to your table and all participants, please stand up. Yeah. Okay. So all meeting participants, could you please gather yourself in the center of the room, please? Yes. Okay, look at the camera, give your best smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, freestyle, please. Say cheese. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, okay, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you. You may return to your seat. The photo session is done. Please be seated. Due to some important matters, Mr. Inarno Jayadi and Ms. Abigail are pleased to proceed to another agenda. Now moving on to the main agenda, I'd like to invite Mr. Jonathan Bravo from ISSB and hand it over to him to lead the course of today's training session. And for your information, the training materials can be accessed by scanning the QR code that's available on the table. Thank you so much. To you.
Thank you very much. Selamat pagi. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to, again, just reiterate the comments from Bing Leng, thanking our hosts, OJK, for putting together this wonderful event. We're again delighted to be here with all of you today. Dear members of ACMF, if I may, we've gone already through the opening remarks. Dear colleagues, we're looking forward to the event today. Again, delighted. And I would like to just open up by saying I feel this is my community, having been working with IOSCO, the International Organization of Securities Regulators, for so many years. I feel almost part of the crowd. I used to be sitting on the table next to you a couple of years ago, but I'm very glad to be here today. So I think we do have some slides, please. Let me just perhaps start by introducing the ISSB team here today. We're coming here as a team, and we hope you'll have the chance to get to know all of us. I think you've seen us on stage, but I'm Jonathan Bravo, Director of Regulatory Affairs with the IFRS Foundation. I'm happy to be joined by my colleagues. Jonathan Lebray, he's our Chief Connectivity and Integrated Reporting Officer. Jarlath Molloy as well, Director of Strategic Affairs. So I will be calling them on to the stage to cover different parts of the program today. And of course, I would like just to give you an overview of what you can expect today. If you are coming here with the feeling that you would be coming just to listen and hear and learn, well, let me just correct you from the start. I mean, we're here to make this session interactive. As being mentioned, this is an opportunity for us to engage with you, but also we're really interested in hearing your views and where you are with respect to your journeys towards the introduction of ISSB standards. And I will be calling on you perhaps later on in the session today to share some of your perspectives. So if we can move to the next slides, please. Just an overview of what you should be expecting today. So we'll start by sharing some of the developments that have taken place since the launch of our standards in June 2023. I know many of you were in Singapore for the launch events, but we just want to bring you up to date to what has happened in the interim between June and October, where we are today. I think we'd also like to share a couple of projects we have in the ISSB pipeline, what's coming up. We have issued a couple of consultations and we want to give you and share with you the latest. And of course, I would like to share with you some of the materials that we're developing in order to support jurisdictions in their journey towards adoption of IFRS 1 and IFRS 2. And we'll also have the privilege to hear from our colleagues from MAS Singapore about the process that led to IOSCO endorsing our standards by the end of July. I think we'll have the chance, of course, break for coffee. Networking is important. I'm really impressed by the camaraderie with all ACMF members. That really caught my attention, and networking is also important, and we would also like the chance to speak to you. And after the coffee break, I would like to just provide some illustrations of some parameters, themes, topics that you may wish to consider when you're putting together your roadmaps. And I would like to share as well a bit more elements that can illustrate that journey. And of course, we would also like to hear from you. What are the challenges you're facing? What's the process you are considering? And I think our colleagues have shared a couple of questions, and I'm hoping you will be willing to share with us that information as well, so that we can take that home and factor that into our thinking. And we will just wrap up sharing some what I think are useful materials, processes that can help you in your implementation processes. And we'll just wrap up summarizing our discussions today. Can we move to the next slide? One more, please. So getting into the milestone, what has happened between June and October this year. I think those of you that had the privilege of being with the at the ACMF chairs session, you probably heard this, but let me just reiterate. We issued our standards, our two inaugural standards, IFRS 1 on general requirements, IFRS 2 on climate-related disclosures by the end of June. And we had the privilege to launch our standards as well in Asian as part of our Singapore launch. So since then, the FSB did announce that the TCFD, all of you know, TCFD is a core component of IFRS 1 and IFRS 2. The main recommendations, the 4 pillars, are an inherent part of our inherent architecture of our standards. And they have asked the ISSB to follow up and monitor the take-up by corporates on TCFD reporting. So we will be doing that going forward. And again, a key development, and we'll learn further about the process today was IOSCO's endorsement of our standards. And we did publish at the same time what we have called an adoption guide overview, which is a document that's intended to guide you through your adoption or implementation considerations. And we'll spend some time today talking about that. And finally, end of July, you may have been following developments, but I think the European Commission endorsed or approved ESRS's standards. And there's a high degree of alignment with respect to climate disclosures between ESRS standards and ISSB. So again, on the FSB, an important element I would like to highlight for you, the fact that TCFD is part of the ISSB architecture. It is important because, as you know, one of the reasons why the ISSB is in place, because we're trying to address what has been called the alphabet soup, that fragmentation that was in the markets with so many different frameworks being used that was actually confusing preparers as well as investors, but as well regulators. We're trying to bring some harmonization of all of that. So the fact that the FSB has asked the ISSB to take over the monitoring of TCFD, I think simplifies the ecosystem even further and reduces, I think, the alphabet soup. As you know, the ISSB brings together the former CDSB, the integrated report, SASB. So we're all moving towards consolidating all those frameworks and integrating them into the ISSB. And we did publish a mapping of TCFD recommendations against IFRS 2. That's information that's available. And I think that is important for those jurisdictions that have started their journey with TCFD. It will reflect and showcase which are the incremental disclosures that S2 is suggesting. But of course, starting with the fact that those have started in the TCFD journey do have an advantage in moving ahead at pace because their preparers will have gained experience with that. You'll probably hear from my dear colleague, your dear colleague, Jeannie's stamp on IOSCO's endorsement, and MAS and Jeannie and the team, Dao and others have been so fundamental. They've taken part in the IOSCO process right from the get-go. I was there with IOSCO when all this, we were talking about trying to put together the assessment process. But it is a very important milestone. I think Bingleng was referring to the fact that this is the second time that IOSCO endorses standards issued by a third party. The first time was in year 2000 when IOSCO endorsed IFRS accounting standards, but it was the ISC standards by then. It just turned into the ISB later on. But we see 25 years later that over 140 jurisdictions do actually mandate our standards. They have become part of the regulatory ecosystem in over 140 jurisdictions. And I think 13 or 15 other countries do permit the use. So it has become truly the global language for financial reporting. And we expect that IOSCO's endorsement will have the same catalyst effect. The fact that IOSCO is calling on its members to consider the ways in which they can refer, incorporate, adopt our standards, we believe it carries a lot of weight. And we're really grateful for IOSCO for that. And given our standards, the IFRS Foundation is a non-for-profit public interest organization. The fact that global capital market authorities have determined that ISSB standards are fit for purpose for capital markets, it brings really credibility and trust as to the fitness and purpose of our standards. I mentioned before the high degree of alignment between IFRS 2 and the ESRS climate proposals. With this slide, I was, can we move to slide number 7? One more, please. Yeah, here. So I think this slide intends to reflect that high degree of alignment. There are some requirements in ISSB standards that are not captured in ESRS standards. I think a good example, and this is particularly important for financial institutions, are finance emissions. That's a requirement that is actually incorporated into IFRS 2, which is not being reflected in ESRS standards. But as well, you know that ESRS standards do incorporate that double materiality perspective. So there are requirements that are actually trying to address information needs from other stakeholders related to impacts that are not included, are not the primary focus of ISSB standards. And there's quite a significant degree of alignment. And we think this is a fundamental aspect that will help, particularly those corporates in Europe be able to, at some point, bring back their disclosures to also be able to report in accordance with ISSB standards without obscuring that global baseline. We can move to the next slide, please. So we believe we're in the process of trying to support reducing complexity in the ecosystem and reducing duplication. And we are in the process of trying to come up with some guidance together with our colleagues from EFRAG, talking about interoperability and how our respective standards can come together. So in that chart on the right-hand side of the slide, you will see that that is more or less the mapping tool that we will be trying to put together. So it will show those elements that are common in ISSB standards and ESRSs. I think a clear example has to do with disclosure of greenhouse gas emissions. There's a high degree of alignment there. I mentioned before about those requirements that are exclusive to ISSB. We'll try to portray those on column A, finance emissions, as a good example. But we will also showcase those requirements that are specific to ESRS standards, which have to do with elements that have to do with addressing the needs of other stakeholders, but other perhaps technical elements such as energy efficiency. So I think a lot has happened since we published our standards in June. We wanted just to bring you up to date and invite you to follow some of those developments. If we can move to the next slide, please. Yeah, here we are. Thank you. So I wanted to give you the chance to, again, take a look of to what we do have in our current sort of work plan. I would like to invite a dear colleague, Jonathan Lebray, just to cover a couple of slides. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jonathan, and good morning, everyone. I'm the IFRS Foundation's second Jonathan, and it's a great pleasure to be here. And I have two roles at the IFRS Foundation. I lead the team responsible for integrated reporting and integrated thinking. And most recently, I've been asked by the ISSB to be the jurisdictional lead for several of the ASEAN markets. So working very closely with Jonathan and our colleagues here. So it's a particular pleasure to be part of the ACMF conference and leaders chairs meeting earlier this week as well. It's also a great pleasure to share with you, as Jonathan said, share with you some brief insights into the ISSB's work plan. And there are really two significant projects that I'd like to share with you from the work plan. The first is the internationalization of the ASSB standards, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board standards. Now, analysis that we conducted shows that around 20% of the ASSB standards that have been incorporated referenced specific jurisdictional laws and regulations. So we felt that by removing these references and making targeted adjustments to the ASSB standards, we can improve their international applicability and remove any regional bias that may have existed in the standards. And this will really enable their value as an important source of guidance embedded in S1 and S2 to be fully realized and fully released for preparers. And so following a consultation and consideration by the ISSB, the ASSB Standards Board Advisory Board will make recommendations for ratification by the full ISSB board. The second project that I'd like to highlight is the ISSB's agenda priorities, future agenda priorities. Because as well as maintaining a clear focus on the implementation of IFRS S1 and S2, which is a very clear and urgent priority for the ISSB, we're also committed to being a climate first, but not a climate only standard setter. And therefore, we've consulted earlier this year on what should be in the ISSB's work program over the next 2 years, which projects could we be initiating over that period to help determine our future strategic direction. And the consultation on our future agenda priorities closed at the beginning of September. And we're now processing the feedback and analysing the responses, including representations from ACMF members and other market participants here in the ASEAN region. And I'd just like to emphasise, before moving on to the next slide, that consideration of our future work programme on which we consulted and what the balance of those future priorities might be does not in any way conflict with our commitment to supporting jurisdictions with the adoption of IFRS S1 and S2. And I want to make that, absolutely clear. So if we move on to the next slide, please, and just go a little bit deeper into the work we're doing on enhancing and maintaining the SASB standards to ensure they become a valued source of guidance for preparers. The consultation that we conducted on the internationalization of the SASB standards elicited over 150 responses, and they were mostly supportive of the direction proposed in the consultation. And so the intention is to publish the standards before the S1 and S2 effective date on the 1st of January 2024. Looking ahead, the incorporation of SASB standards and research materials represents a rich inheritance from the IFRS Foundation's perspective. And so the ISSB will look to advance industry-based research while maintaining the standards and engaging with the market in the future. The next slide speaks to the strategic direction that I was speaking about a moment ago. And when we consider the strategic direction, there are really 3 factors that I think it's useful to bear in mind. The first factor is our commitment to delivering a genuine global baseline. And that means not just delivering standards, but also the educational materials, capacity building materials, and the deep engagement to support jurisdictional adoption. Second, as we are a climate first, but not climate only standard setter, this means consulting the market on potential future projects, as we've done with the ISSB's recent agenda consultation. Now, this consultation resulted in over 400 responses globally, and these are now being analysed. And it will be critical for the technical staff and the board to assess that market feedback and come to decisions on what that future work plan looks like. And so the new 2-year work plan is expected to be finalised and released in the first half of 2024. And then the final of my slides, the next one, which really relates to the third factor that I wanted to identify, and that relates to the new popular word in the corporate reporting lexicon, which is interoperability. And it's the ISSB's ambition to help deliver a simplified, more efficient corporate reporting landscape. That really is our overarching strategic goal. Our jurisdictional working group that has been created to engage between the ISSB and individual jurisdictions creates the formal structure to enable dialogue between the ISSB and individual jurisdictions to support the building blocks approach, which again is at the heart of our strategy. We've fully adopted the TCFD recommendations within the ISSB standards to ensure that we demonstrate alignment with current disclosure practices. CDP will incorporate S2 climate-related data into its platform for the 2024 disclosure cycle. And many companies, of course, disclose on the CDP platform and will collect data as required for S2 for the 2024 financial year. And finally, and importantly, and we saw this as a real demonstration at the conference yesterday, we're deepening our partnership and relationship with GRI. again, to support a more cohesive and efficient corporate reporting landscape. And so taken together, we believe that these efforts on interoperability will help to secure and deliver a more comprehensive global corporate reporting system. Jonathan, back to you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Brilliant. And I should say that opportunities like the one we had, I think on Monday, talking to the ACMF chairs on their perspectives with respect to our agenda priorities, I think those are very useful for us. And, we are really hopeful that the protocol that we have signed with ACMF will provide an opportunity for you and us to engage on the way we develop our standards. As you know, we don't run standards on their own. Our process is really participatory, inclusive. We're actually seeking market feedback, but also regulatory feedback, the way we shape our standards. We can move to the next slide, and having given you an overview of what has happened since June, what are the projects that we have in the pipeline, I would like to get more into how we can support you all in your jurisdictional journeys towards adoption. And we've been talking about our standards already. We will have the chance to dig deeper into the IOSCO endorsement process. But of course, there are different elements in the ecosystem that I think they're important to consider. And I know some of you do also have responsibilities with respect to assurance, audit oversight responsibilities. It is not a role from the ISSB to determine what the assurance framework should be. But of course, we are convinced that having a sound assurance framework underpins quality reporting, and that's fundamental for the markets. And perhaps speaking with my previous hat, because I was involved for many years on the international audit standard setting, we're really hopeful that the IAASB, they put forward a consultation paper, an exposure draft on their new sustainability standard. We're hopeful you will engage with them and provide feedback as we collectively shape that assurance framework that's going to underpin the sustainability related disclosures being prepared in accordance with the ISSB. I know there's been a number of roundtables taking place around the world. There was one very recently, I think, in Kuala Lumpur. Had the chance to participate in one in Brussels. So we believe that will be another fundamental element. And we'll talk later on as to how you, securities regulators, capital market authorities, can also contribute, thinking perhaps more prospectively about what the assurance framework should be. And of course, our role is to set standards, but our standards are worthless if these are not being used, if they're not put in practice. And as you know, I was talking before about our standards becoming mandatory in over 140 jurisdictions. Our standards have really been designed also to operate in the regulatory ecosystem, and jurisdictions do have a key role in introducing our standards into the regulatory frameworks. And we're hoping that the discussions today will help bring a bit more clarity as to what's a reasonable process so that we can, at the end, provide the consistency, comparability that markets, policymakers, and regulators have been claiming that are needed. But of course, we cannot forget that market participants do also have a key role. We're having a session later on in the afternoon that will be addressed for preparers, for corporates. It is important that they become up to speed with respect to our standards. And you have the chance back in June, those that participated in Singapore, to get more of a deeper dive on IFRS S1 and S2. We will do the same later on today with preparers. Those of you that may be interested, I think you can access that information. We're also hoping that as regulators put together their roadmaps, a number of preparers will already want to start their journey and report on a voluntary basis and apply our standards. Our standards, of course, mentioned, do have a certain regulatory function. We can support capital markets, but it is also a tool for corporates to enhance their communications with investors. So we understand many will have an interest in starting early in the journey. So we need to bring collectively together all these elements in the ecosystem. We can turn to the next slide, please. So just reiterating the value proposition of the ISSB, there is a strong demand. I think market players, investors, regulators did acknowledge that there were some shortcomings in the system. Information was not comparable. I was talking before about the alphabet soup fragmentation in the standards. So the ISSB was called to deliver this global baseline that was of disclosures that were decision useful for investors and that can support capital markets, as IOSCO has reiterated through its endorsement process. It's also to promote transparency, consistency, and also to provide that efficient reporting landscape that Jonathan was also referring to. But we do understand this is a significant change management exercise, not just for preparers that need to invest time in getting prepared to be able to report in accordance to enhanced requirements, but also for regulators. I mean, you're all shaping your structures, you're all assessing the readiness in your system, depending on your starting points, what are the frameworks that have been used. We understand that, and we are adopting, I think, a strategy in order to balance those initial challenges with the need to progress at pace and be comprehensive in the way jurisdictions incorporate the standards. And I think together with the publication of IFRS 1 and S2 in June, we did publish a number of materials that I think I invite you to take a look. Those are useful basis for conclusions, the feedback statement, but as well an effect analysis that talks actually about the benefits for capital markets of incorporating the standards and how over time these benefits do outweigh the costs, again, by reducing fragmentation, transparency, streamlining processes. So I just wanted to recap where we're coming from. We can turn to the next slide, please. So I mentioned before an adoption guide, which is a document that we believe can support you in your considerations. We published that roadmap in July. It is the precursor of a final adoption guide that will be published later on this year. And you will have seen already that a number of jurisdictions have already announced or put for public consultation their jurisdictional roadmaps. They have been seeking feedback. I think clear examples, many of them are actually in Asia, Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, but as well UK. I think they closed very recently a consultation calling for evidence as to how ISSB standards could actually operate in the UK ecosystem. And many other jurisdictions, it's really rewarding to see that some of them coming from growth and emerging jurisdictions have already announced their intention to early adopt. And of course, many of them do share challenges that may be common to all of you in terms of the challenges that have been identified by the corporates or even the regulators. And here I think Brazil, Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana are in the process. So let me just provide a bit of color of what the adoption guide is going to bring to you. I think we need to be mindful that the objective, and we do understand the need for flexibility and the need to balance those initial challenges, but the objective is to facilitate consistent jurisdictional approaches towards adoption. So we're trying to balance those challenges by allowing or suggesting phasing approaches that can deliver that balance, but it will set also expectations as to what should be the pace of introduction of standards, what's the scope of application, and we will be developing some principles that will help assess the jurisdictional journeys towards adoption. We think we can help you with that. And we're keen to monitor together with bodies such as IOSCO or the FSB, the process. We think there are a number of proportional elements included in our standards. Some have been taken by language, common terminology that was already available in ISB standards. Others, have more to do with the provision of temporary release, precisely to help companies get prepared, design their data collection systems, bring the expertise that may be needed in order to progress in the journey. And we think jurisdictions can have the ability to extend some of those reliefs, but rather than a cherry-picking approach, which each jurisdiction chooses and picks from our standards what needs to be embedded, we think we should be promoting consistent adoption approaches, and we can talk about that later on. So The adoption guide will consider elements such as the legal standing of the jurisdictional requirements, whether this is a requirement coming from an authority, the securities regulator, the listing authority. It talks about the focus on being on publicly accountable entities, and particularly those that are perhaps on the prime or the standard markets. We believe the larger entities have already started in the journey. They do have more experience reporting sustainability factors, and they have the skills and competencies to proceed at pace. Again, trying to facilitate the phasing in and the graduation of requirements, we're suggesting the focus being on consolidated information, regardless the requirements that may be put in place for subsidiary, for separate reports. We think that's a smart way of going ahead. We think that jurisdictions may have the ability to remove certain optional treatments that are available as part of S1 and S2. But again, we'll try to provide some orientation as to how the reporting entities may be able to assert compliance with ISSB standards as issued by the ISSB, which is one requirement that's already included in IFRS S1. If we can move to the next slide. So I've been talking briefly about proportionality and guidance that's already built and embedded in S1 and S2. I've been talking briefly about the transitional release with the possibility for jurisdictions to extend those and what's the purpose of the adoption guide. But of course, we do understand that capacity building is also needed in the process. So that's, I think, a fourth pillar that we're very mindful. And this is why we're here today as well, delivering these sessions. And I'll let Jarlath talk later on. He's very much leading some of this work for the IFRS Foundation and the ISSB, and I would like him to give a bit more color later on about that. So that's the four-pillar strategy that we're putting in place. So in terms of reliefs, and for you to consider, these are the reliefs that are already included in IFRS S1 and S2. So one has to do with climate first. Jonathan mentioned that the ISSB was set to establish sustainability reporting disclosure standards, starting with climate, but not only for climate. So our agenda consultation will signal our direction of travel going forward. But of course, IFRS S1 allows entities to get started with climate. We believe this may be a relief that jurisdictions may wish to consider. We do understand, and this is the case, we've seen already with some of the jurisdictions I was talking before. We've seen this in Hong Kong, we've seen this in Australia. People are more prepared to start with climate, probably because of the focus with TCFD. So this is an option that will be made available. We've also heard challenges around disclosures of Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions. There is a relief already included in IFRS standards, and this is again something we're hearing. Preparers may need a bit more time to collect and gather the data. And this is again one a relief that may be available. The timing of reporting, as you know, our standards do require that sustainability information is provided together with financial information. We think that's critical for investors to be able to have a complete picture. But we do understand the challenges on the initial phases, trying to transition there. This is a relief where you may wish to consider the phasing and when it would be suitable to bring all of that together. Comparative reporting, this is a relief that's really only available on year one. We're not asking reporting entities on the first year to gather information from previous reporting periods. Once they're in the journey, we think this information is material. We're here in order to provide comparability to the markets across industries, across companies, but of course, on a year-to-year basis, that's also so fundamental. So we believe it wouldn't make sense to extend reliefs for comparative information because reporting entities will have already provided that information already. And again, the greenhouse gas protocol is one of the other reliefs. So if companies are using a different measurement method, I think they're allowed a one-year transition in order to move to greenhouse gas protocol. This is one other relief that may be available for entities that jurisdictions may wish to consider. One element that I think Bing was talking about previously is the need to think about ISSB standards as a comprehensive suite of standards. And even for those jurisdictions that would like to proceed on climate first, I just wanted to reiterate the importance of doing that in the context of IFRS S1. IFRS S1, it's the lexicon, the grammar, it's the architecture. It brings together all the key foundational key concepts that are necessary in order to apply IFRS 2, even if a company is required just to report on climate factors. It talks about value chains. It talks about materiality. It sets the qualitative characteristics. So again, we think this is an important consideration for all jurisdictions that are willing to move ahead, but feel they are prepared to start in a journey with climate. If we can move to the next slide, please. So here are some of the elements that are included in IFRS 1 that will be relevant even for climate reporting only. I was talking before about value chain. It also talks about comparative information, assertion against ISSB standards, aggregation, disaggregation. And for you, securities regulators, the connectivity with financial information is so important. Of course, you're not split between financial and sustainability. At the end of the day, you want to ensure that information that's being provided by issuers to investors is comprehensive. And I think those connections are fundamental. And I think Jonathan is doing a lot of work in terms of integration and connectivity. So this is very much for those of you that may be more familiar with the financial reporting ecosystem. So S1 brings together elements of IS1, IS8, and the conceptual framework. So it is really the foundation of sustainability reporting in accordance with ISSB. So we invite you to consider the relevance of building the sustainability suite, including S1 in your proposals. If we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of the scope of entities, I was referring before that the scope we have in mind to get started is publicly accountable entities. So these are considerations we're putting out as part of our adoption guide for you to take into account. So we think that those entities which have securities that are traded in public markets or are in the process of issuing securities, those are the type of entities that would fall within the scope that we would have in mind in order to determine a jurisdictional adoption. And those entities that we believe on this initial stage perhaps should be out of the scope have to do with those entities that do not have public accountability or do operate in very small markets, or perhaps those entities that are small or medium sizes. We all acknowledge it will be challenging for them. As you know, in the accounting ecosystem, we do have a particular standard for SMEs. So in this initial journey, we think our standards, may be more suitable for those publicly accountable entities, particularly, we can move to the next slide, particularly those in the, let's say, main boards. So where again, as part of our adoption guide, put it together a number of considerations. We do understand that many markets do have market structures, market tiers, market segments. We know this is not absolutely standardized for all jurisdictions, and this is just by way of illustration. It's not that this is a binary sort of option, but it's just an invitation for you to consider, in accordance to your own market structure, what would be a suitable journey. So we believe that those first adopters should probably come from the first tier or prime or premium markets. So it's really those issuers that do have a global orientation, a large shareholder base, large volumes of traded securities, basically those that are required to meet enhanced transparency requirements. And again, we think that the second tier standards, should probably follow shortly after those in the prime tiers. They also have a global orientation. They also have a significant shareholder base. But again, particularly at this initial part of our journey, we think that growth, entry, venture markets may not be the suitable level because again, they do have perhaps more of a local domestic orientation. They do have smaller volumes. So at the end, it's not about the number of companies. It's trying to capture the larger players that are really prepared to start in the journey, and those that also have a higher impact on the market. So from a securities regulatory perspective, those players that do really have an important weight in the market. So if I'm right, we've probably reached time for, give me just 1 second. I think we're running slightly late, but I think before we turn into jurisdictional roadmaps, I would like to give the chance to our colleague Jeannie Stamp to talk about the IOSCO process and how they have approached our standards. I don't know whether Jeannie's already ready, available. I think she will be joining us virtually, if I'm correct. Oh, Jeannie, there you are. Nice meeting you. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm not sure we can hear you. I'm taking you can hear us, but we cannot hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, perfect.
Okay, fantastic.
Good morning, Jeannie.
Good morning, Jonathan, and selamat pagi, Ibu dan Bapak. So thank you very much for having me here to share with you. And I'm sorry I could not be there in person, but I look forward to being there the next time round. So as Jonathan mentioned, IOSCO endorsed the ISSB standards on July 25th as fit for purpose for capital markets. So now why does this matter? I'll give you 5 reasons. IOSCO's endorsement is valued by the G20, G7 and FSB, and it facilitates the work of other standard setters such as BCBS and IAIS for future development of financial sector disclosures. Secondly, the support for a private entity, as you heard from John earlier, working in the public interest has only happened for the 2nd time in IOSCO's existence. Third, the ISSB standards will play a key role in addressing the current fragmentation in the alphabet soup that has rendered sustainability information incomplete, incomparable, and inconsistent. And fourth, it will promote investor protection by addressing greenwashing and enhancing the reliability of disclosures. And lastly, it will foster a consistent language and facilitate data collection and digitization, which will enhance users' ability to analyze and use the information for decision-making. So if we put the first slide on, please. So what were the IOSCO endorsement criteria? These criteria are based on IOSCO's view that the global framework for sustainability reporting should meet the macro criteria that you see on this slide. And how was our endorsement done? Through the Sustainable Finance Task Force, STF, IOSCO has been engaging intensively with ISSB for over 2 years, which is why we also work very closely with Jonathan and his team in his previous role and now and also with his current role. Now, the STF has completed a comprehensive and independent review of the ISSB standards using endorsement criteria published in June 2021. Now, this is the set of detailed criteria, 20 attributes that I presented to ACMF in our previous sessions. So now I'll provide a high-level overview of the results of the endorsement and where additional work or guidance from ISSB may be required. Next slide, please. For attribute 1A target outcome, both S1 and S2 meet the criteria. The stated purpose of the ISSB standards is to provide useful information to primary users of general purpose financial reports in making decisions relating to providing resources to the entity. For attribute 1B objective, both S1 and S2 meet the criteria. The ISSB standards, along with the plan adoption guidance, include a mix of temporary and permanent reliefs to ensure proportionality and facilitate implementation. Now, even though these reliefs mean that disclosures will not be 100% comparable, IOSCO has concluded that firstly, the ISSB has reached an appropriate balance between addressing implementation challenges and upholding the objective of consistent and comparable disclosures. Secondly, similar provisions already exist to some extent in financial reporting, and this has not prevented international convergence of financial reporting practices. And finally, thirdly, investors' demand for high-quality sustainability information across global capital markets will promote swift convergence of reporting practices. Next slide, please. On Dimension 2, Principles, Frameworks and Standards, 2A, Purpose of Framework, S1 provides a common, comprehensive and structured global framework for sustainability reporting on a breadth of sustainability topics with an investor materiality lens. On 2B approach, both S1 and S2 leverage existing principles and frameworks such as the 4-pillar TCFD structure. S1 refers to sources of guidance such as the SASB standards, CDSB guidance for water and biodiversity related disclosures, GRI, and the EU sustainability reporting standards. Now, S2 requires entities to use the already widely adopted GHG protocol to measure their emissions. 2C on prescription versus principles, both S1 and S2 provide a principle-based framework with a core prescription to promote consistency and comparability. Now, limited flexibilities have been introduced to support proportionality, such as the concept of using reasonable and supportable information that is available at a reporting date without undue cost or effort, and the concept of skills, capabilities, and resources available to the entity. So that users can apply these provisions effectively and consistently, IOSCO encourages ISSB to develop further guidance or educational materials. While the concept of undue cost or effort is familiar from financial reporting standards, applying it to sustainability reporting may pose new challenges. And skills, capabilities, and resources available to the entity is a more novel concept to allow preparers to apply qualitative approaches for several disclosure items, and again, guidance will be required. IOSCO also recommends that ISSB builds upon the existing application guidance on climate resilience, as scenario analysis has been flagged as more complex by many stakeholders. And IOSCO has called upon ISSB to publish its planned adoption guidance in a timely manner. This guidance will be critical in legitimizing different pathways for effective, proportionate, and timely application, adoption, or use of the standards in local jurisdictions. Now, IOSCO recognizes that even with options to extend some of the transitional reliefs built into the standards, some jurisdictions and entities which are less familiar with sustainability reporting may face implementation issues. So IOSCO will work closely with ISSB to support implementation, including capacity building. Next slide, please. Dimension 3, topic scope and materiality. 3A, sustainability topics covered. S1 provides a framework for disclosure on a broad scope of sustainability risk and opportunities that may affect an entity's future prospects, and S2 explicitly covers climate. Future ISSB standards will set out disclosure requirements on other specific environmental and social topics. ISSB recently concluded their consultation on agenda priorities, and IOSCO will engage with ISSB as it considers the responses. Now, IOSCO has noted that ISSB may need to further elaborate disclosure expectations in relation to areas such as transition planning, which are of increasing interest to investors as well as financial authorities such as VCBS and GFS and FSB. Now, 3B on materiality lens, S1 and S2 require an investor materiality lens to be applied, specifically requiring preparers to disclose information about sustainability-related risks and opportunities that could reasonably be expected to affect the entity's cash flows, its access to finance, or cost of capital over the short, medium, or long term. Now, the definition of materiality relies on the definition in the IAS1 presentation of financial statements, which is well established in financial reporting. And ISSB has stated it will issue further guidance to help entities conduct materiality assessments. On 3C, dynamic materiality and interoperability, the ISSB standards accommodate dynamic materiality by acknowledging the evolving nature of developments in sustainability matters. And it set up several consultative groups to support its standard setting activities, including a sustainability consultative committee as encouraged by IOSCO in IOSCO's June 2021 report. This committee was established expressly to identify, inform, and advise the ISSB on priority sustainability matters and related technical protocols, as well as significant interdependencies between sustainability matters. IOSCO has also considered that to enhance interoperability, ISSB had taken appropriate steps on 3 fronts. Firstly, to align S1 and S2 with corporate reporting norms. Secondly, to implement organizational structures to keep up with developments in other jurisdictions, such as the Jurisdictional Working Group and the Sustainability Standards Advisory Forum, whilst also engaging deeply with key jurisdictions such as the EU. And thirdly, it has ensured sufficient precision and application of definitions and concepts to form a robust foundation for interoperability with jurisdiction-specific requirements. On 3D, industry-specific guidance, S1 and S2 require entities to disclose industry-based metrics associated with specific business models and economic activities that characterize participation in an industry. Now, the standards state the entity shall refer to and consider the applicability of the SASB industry-based standards, which recognize that financial materiality of sustainability matters differs across industries. Now, the ISSB standards allow an entity to conclude that the SASB standards are not applicable in their circumstances, but do not elaborate on how an entity may reach such a conclusion. So IOSCO believes this requires further monitoring and further illustrative examples from ISSB to support the consistent application of the requirement and to facilitate assurance. IOSCO has also noted that the detailed content of the SASB standards would need to be subject to a broad-based stakeholder feedback and IFRS Foundation's due process if ISSB intends to make disclosure against the SASB metrics binding in the future. On 3E, company level materiality assessment, S1 states that materiality is an entity-specific aspect of relevance and requires an entity's disclosure to ultimately be made on the basis of an entity-specific judgment, notwithstanding the inclusion of cross-industry metrics and the reference to industry-specific SASB standards. Next slide, please. Dimension 4, narrative disclosures and quantitative metrics. For 4A, narrative disclosures, the ISSB standards require detailed narrative disclosures for all 4 pillars of governance, strategy, risk management, and risk metrics and targets, with additional strategy subsections. These specified content requirements facilitate consistent and standardized management discussion and analysis. Now, the standard provides guidance on 1, criteria for use of qualitative information instead of quantitative information. 2, developing consistent narrative content to connect the different elements in a coherent discussion format. And 3, criteria for understandability of disclosures, including language and structure to ensure the usefulness of the information. On 4B, quantitative metrics, S2 requires the disclosure of 7 cross-industry quantitative metrics as well as industry-based metrics. For quantitative targets, the standards require granular details and structured content, such as time period, milestones, interim targets, and the standards also require disclosure of current and anticipated effects on financial position, financial performance, and cash flows over the short, medium, and long term. The reference to the use of tables, graphs, and diagrams provide for a structured, consistent, and typically quantitative approach to disclosures. For 4C, reference to science-based parameters, S2 requires use of the GHG protocol, which is a science-based methodology with specific measurement formulas and standardized metrics. Now, although S2 does not prescribe the use of science-based targets or Paris-aligned scenarios, investors can understand if and how science-based parameters were used through required disclosures on 4 matters. Firstly, how the International Agreement on Climate Change has informed the target. Secondly, whether the scenario chosen for climate resilience is aligned to the latest international climate agreement. Third, whether the target was derived using a sectoral decarbonization approach, which is a science-based approach. And lastly, the disclosure of gross rather than net emissions and the segregation of the use of carbon credits, which is aligned with science-based decarbonization target setting methodologies that focus on the business's own and value chain activities rather than carbon credits. On 4D, structured historical, current, and forecast data, the standards require disclosure on current and forecast data and similarly structured comparative information for the preceding period. And disclosure of this structured information of sufficient quality is further supported by, firstly, the use of financial terms, for example, cash flows, carrying amounts of assets and liabilities, which are defined terms with structured disclosure formats under IFRS accounting standards. And secondly, S1 requirements for connectivity with financial statements. On 4E, forward-looking, the standards require granular disclosures on metrics, underlying assumptions, and measurement approaches for targets. S2 provides detailed guidance on the characteristics of a climate-related target and requires disclosure on transition plans, including assumptions and dependencies. And granular requirements are also there for funding and committed capital expenditure, as well as for assessment of climate resilience, which can be conducted using scenario analysis. On 4F, format, location, and taxonomy, S1 does not prescribe the location of disclosures. However, IOSCO agrees with ISSB's approach as it reduces the scope for duplicative reporting and enhances interoperability with jurisdictional initiatives and regulatory requirements that may themselves prescribe specific disclosure locations. And S1 guidance on cross-referencing and the future use of digital tagging should remove the necessity of having entire disclosure sets in full in one single comprehensive location. The guidance on clear identification and specification of location also facilitates data collection and access. IOSCO is engaging with the IFRS Foundation as it develops a common taxonomy to create a consistent language and facilitate data collection, digitization, tagging, and storage. Next slide, please. On the last dimension, 5, linkage between sustainability issues and business strategy and financial matters. On 5A and 5B, the analysis determined that the ISSB standards are compatible with financial reporting standards. The standards require disclosure, discussion, and analysis of the current and anticipated quantitative impact of sustainability issues on financial performance, financial position, and cash flows over different time horizons. As I mentioned earlier, IOSCO finds it beneficial if ISSB can provide further guidance from preparers on how to make a judgment that they may lack the sufficient skills, capabilities, and resources to provide quantitative information on such financial impacts and can only provide qualitative information. On 5C, linkage between sustainability issues and business strategy and financial implications, the standards provide readers with consistent and detailed management discussion and analysis on the entity's strategy, governance, risk management, and metrics and targets, and how risk and opportunities can reasonably be expected to affect the entity's prospects. The standards facilitate connectivity and compatibility with financial reporting standards, for instance, by grounding the disclosure requirements in the same underlying concepts, for example, materiality that I mentioned earlier, and by requiring entities to disclose in a manner that enables users to understand the connections between sustainability-related financial disclosures and related financial statements. S1 also requires sustainability-related information to be provided at the same time as the related financial statements. Now, further work is underway at the IASB to explore whether and how entities can provide better information about the effects of climate-related risk in their financial statements, and IOSCO is engaging with both IASB and ISSB on future work regarding further integration of financial and sustainability reporting. And on 5D, audit and assurance, the analysis determined that ISSB standards provide a framework that can facilitate independent audit and assurance. IOSCO identified certain characteristics of assurable information, including what S1 had identified, which are firstly, the fundamental qualitative characteristics, relevance, materiality, and faithful representation. And secondly, the enhancing qualitative characteristics, which are comparability, verifiability, timeliness, and understandability. Now, IOSCO's assessment did identify some challenges for assurance providers, such as assurance on forward-looking information and novel areas in which reporting entities will need to exercise judgment, such as the undue cost and effort that I talked about earlier. Now, these assurance challenges will benefit from further work by standard setters, either as additional guidance materials or for inclusion in the new assurance standard being developed by the IAASB. IOSCO continues its engagement and feedback to IAASB on the new standard. Next slide, please. So what does the endorsement mean for us? Well, now that IOSCO has endorsed the ISSB standards as fit for purpose as a global framework for sustainability-related information, the ball is firmly in the court of individual jurisdictions. IOSCO has called on member jurisdictions to consider ways in which they might adopt, apply, or otherwise be informed by the ISSB standards, reflecting each jurisdiction's circumstances, similar to what IOSCO did with the IFRS accounting standards. IOSCO encourages jurisdictions to consider implementing ISSB standards for compulsory application or to allow their companies to voluntarily use the standards. And relatedly, IOSCO welcomes ISSB's upcoming guidance to set out the pathways for gradual take-up of the ISSB standards, which will enable the jurisdictions and issuers that find the full immediate implementation of the ISSB's standards challenging to participate progressively. We have to get everyone on board and everyone moving. Next slide, please. Now, for IOSCO's next steps, it has committed to continue working closely with ISSB, with IAASB, other relevant bodies, and of course with IOSCO members to help build capacity to promote the consistent and comparable sustainability-related disclosures for investors. So we look forward to further engagement and cooperation with all of you in the room. And thank you very much. If you have any questions about the endorsement assessment, feel free to reach out to me by email. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. As always, a wonderful presentation. And I would like to thank you, the IOSCO team that, has spent quite a lot of time with the IOSCO endorsement process for the quality of the engagement. And of course, we truly appreciate as well the recommendations coming with that. And we're seriously addressing those, and we're looking forward to further engagement. Thank you very much. I know we are running a bit late, but I would still like to give you the chance, perhaps, if you have any burning questions after the first initial presentations. We'll have time later on, but I would just like to see whether there is any questions before we break for coffee. There's a question over there. Yep. If you can please identify yourself and your organization, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Amanda from OJK. Actually, I have two questions. My first question is regarding the various possible location of sustainability disclosure. As under IFRS S1, sustainability disclosure can be placed as part of the general purpose financial statement or other reports required by regulators. So one of the challenge is the consistency and uniformity of the location of the disclosure, whether in the financial statement or a separate report. So do you have any information on how other countries tend to place this disclosure? That were the first questions. And the next question is, if the location is in the financial report, what about the verification of all the information required in IFRS S1 and S2? Will it be the same assurance scope as the financial statement carried out by the auditor? Actually, this is in line with the one of recommendation from IOSCO before. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent question. If I can try to address your first question, you will have seen from our standards that we are, let's say, location or placement agnostic. We do understand that different jurisdictions have different requirements in place. So we are not prescribing any particular location. we think it's probably up to regulators, standard setters to determine, in light of jurisdictional requirements, what's the best location. We have made clear anyway that our ISSB disclosures should be part of general purpose financial reports. So that can be part of the annual report package, whether together with the financial statements, part of management commentary, together with an integrated report. So we understand that it will be in light of the diversity of jurisdictional approaches, we shouldn't be prescribing a particular location. But we, again, would like to reiterate the relevance of bringing the connectivity with the financial piece. So we're actually looking forward to the session later on to hear from you whether you have identified any particular place where you think this can work. And we can have the chance perhaps to learn from those jurisdictions that have started in the process, what are their views. From an ISSB perspective, we're not prescribing any particular location. To your second question with respect to if the information is integrated into a single report, whether there should be one single assurance and audit report, that's the question, if I understand you well. I do understand that, again, that very much depends to the regulatory requirements when it comes to assurance. I think the financial information, we all acknowledge that it is an audit process, which may slightly vary with respect to the assurance requirements or sustainability information. As you may note, some of the proposals that are being currently put forward by the ISSB are on assurance engagements that may be considering limited or reasonable scope of assurance, which is slightly less comprehensive than an audit process. So that information may require two different assurance sort of processes, because as of today, the financial statements audit process, I think it's very clear. But again, I think we are not here to set assurance standards, but we need to make sure that the entire system is comprehensive enough, and that at least that we provide investors information about what their expectations should be of the different assurance reports that they could separate pieces. Thank you. Any other questions? And of course, my colleagues, if you want to add or take any of my comments, feel free to just take the mic. If there are other questions, let's perhaps break for coffee. You'll have the chance to think about further, and we can have later on perhaps elaborate on some of those points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Ladies and gentlemen, we will have 10-minute breaks for some refreshment and coffee available in the foyer. Due to time constraint, please be back in this room at 10:50. Thank you.
Welcome everyone again to the second part of our session. For those of you still having coffee, just remind you can bring your coffee and snacks into the room. We're about to get started. So with that, we're coming, let's say, to the more interactive session of our workshop today. And before I start turning the mic to all of you, I would just like to start with a few reflections that can perhaps give a bit of shape of those considerations you would like to think about, and again, taking from our adoption guide. So if we can place again the slides on the screen, slide 25. We'll give it a few more seconds. Next slide, please. And let's jump already into the next slide. So with this slide, we basically wanted to share with you an illustration of possible components of a jurisdictional roadmap. And again, I think, this all boils down to the very basic questions. What, who, when, where, we were talking before about location and placement. So in terms of what, I think it will be important for all of you to make a determination of the scope of sustainability topics on these early stages. As we were talking before, our standards already anticipate a climate-first approach, but not a climate only. So I think it will be important to design what's the graduation, the phasing in of all those requirements. And again, just let me reiterate that for those of you that may be considering starting with climate, it will be important to consider as well the adoption and incorporation of S1 for the reasons I mentioned. So in terms of the who, again, I think it's important for you to figure out, in accordance to your respective market structures, how you introduce requirements based on the nature, the size of the industry, whether all financial institutions, banks, insurance companies, whether you want to make the requirements extensive to private entities, SMEs, parents, subsidiary. I think all of these are important components for your considerations. I think our adoption guide is intended to provide you some guidance as to how you can start going through all of that. And again, in terms of when, you all know that our standards become effective as of 1 January 2024, and it will be important for you to figure out what is a suitable effective date. Our standards already anticipate that early application is possible. So those that are considering already putting in place mandatory disclosures, requirements for entities, but you may not be ready to press starting in 2024. One option for consideration is, again, permitting those entities that may want to report in accordance with ISSB standards to do so. But again, you'll probably need to think of those transition reliefs that are embedded in the standards, what's the phasing in of requirements, and what should be the timelines of reporting in accordance with financial reports. And again, one thing we've heard very clearly, and I think this was also part of Jeannie's remarks earlier, is the need to bring connectivity with financial information. And I think an easy way to do that is providing investors with the opportunity to have that comprehensive picture around the same time. And again, we were talking before about the placement of the disclosures, and again, we are agnostic as to where this should be as far as they are part of general purpose financial reports. If we can move to the next slide. Again, I think you will probably need to think of the reporting sort of boundaries. So we understand this has been very much, I think, the approach as well for financial reporting that the ISB has followed, that the information should be targeted at least for consolidated information. You may want to think as well as to what is really the path for the different entities in your stored markets. We understand the largest players should come at pace, be more comprehensive from the beginning, but you may want to extend perhaps some of the reliefs for other entities within your different sort of layers. We can move, please, to the next slide. Yeah, here. We're talking before about assurance. We're talking about the AASB's framework, the proposal on ISA 5000. But I think we should clarify there are already some assurance standards in place, like ISAE 3000 and others that could perhaps facilitate early introduction of requirements as the AASB progresses with their proposals. A number of organizations, and I think IOSCO has been considering this as part of the report they put forward on trying to bring, again, consistency with respect to the assurance framework. Who should be the provider of the assurance? Should this be accounting related assurance providers? Should there be non-accounted related assurance providers? I think these are important components for you to think about. And again, we were talking yesterday about the complementarity of ISSB and GRI standards. And again, you may want to consider whether adding to the investor-focused disclosures that the ISSB can provide, whether there are any other stakeholder needs that you think should be embedded into the requirements. But again, I think our standards make very clear that the ISSB disclosures, the global baseline, shouldn't be obscure. We believe that information is so important for investors to be able to make informed decisions, that that information should be really prominent. And I'm sure you've given some thought to that, and I know that the ACMF has been putting together or collecting some data from all of you with respect to your existing regulatory frameworks. But again, I think it's interesting to think about what are really the legal regulatory vehicles where you can introduce some of these disclosures. Is this through securities regulations, bulletins, newsletters? I mean, you all have probably different tools for that. Whether, and we have seen this in a number of jurisdictions, whether this is something that stock exchanges can perhaps spearhead and introduce some of these requirements through their listing rules. Are there any changes that need to be made to Corporates or Companies Act? And again, with respect to assurance, whether there are any audit directives, audit regulations that need to be amended? And again, talking about the supervisory or enforcement regime, based on my experience with IOSCO, I know that each jurisdiction has its own complexities in terms of the regulatory bodies that are involved. And I think you may want to think as well as to what's really the approach to be followed, whether the prudential regulator should be involved, whether you have a national sustainability standard setter in place. So I think these are important considerations. We just wanted to put this on the screen for illustrative purposes. So I think with that, we would really like to hear today from you as to how you're thinking of introducing ISSB requirements into your frameworks. And I believe that you may have received a number of questions that we wanted you to consider before coming to the program. But I know that at least Singapore has already put together some recommendations from this committee. I think Yuling Fang was yesterday referring to it as SRAC, not SREC, not the green monster. And maybe we can start by MAS Singapore providing a bit of context and color as to what their proposals are, their thinking. I don't know whether we have our MAS colleagues here in the room. Any of them may want to share perhaps their experience with us. Over there, you are. So I can perhaps, you have a microphone over there, right? So again, if you can just say your name, we know you're from MAS Singapore. I know many colleagues know you, but thank you.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. My name is Jiaying. I'm from the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And we would just like to share a brief overview of our legal and regulatory landscape that governs sustainability and financial reporting. So our regime distinguishes between listed entities on the SGX and non-listed domestic entities. For listed entities, the Singapore Exchange Regulation, also known as the SGX RegCo, sets and monitors sustainability reporting requirements in compliance with SGX listing rules. These rules mandate that sustainability reports must describe practices with reference to primary components, including the material environment, social and governance factors, climate-related disclosures, policies and practices, targets, as well as sustainability reporting frameworks, amongst others. For non-listed entities, the Accounting and Corporate Regulatory Authority, also known as ACRA, is responsible for setting and monitoring sustainability reporting requirements, of which are currently under consultation. Moving on to financial reporting, the Singapore Financial Reporting Standards, also known as the SFRS, is set by the Accounting Standards Committee within ACRA, whose policy intent is to adopt standards and interpretations that are equivalent to the IFRS. In this regard, listed issuers are required to prepare financial statements in accordance with either the SFRS, IFRS, or US GAAP. Meanwhile, non-listed domestic entities are required to report in accordance with the SFRS. Now I may pass my time to my colleague at the XGX to share about our sustainability roadmap.
Thanks, Yain. Hi, everyone. My name is Ing Chang. I'm from Singapore Exchange. I'm from the regulation department, so we are the regulation arm of the exchange. So I think Xian has mentioned about the SRAC. So the SRAC is basically this collaboration between the exchange, Singapore Exchange, and also the corporate regulatory authority in Singapore. So what the SRAC has done is to introduce a roadmap to introduce sustainability reporting to all companies in Singapore. So the listed companies and also the non-listed companies. The public consultation was closed recently. Was closed about 2 weeks ago, and now we're in the midst of reviewing the responses. And maybe what I can share is just 4 pillars of what the consultation is, or rather what the recommendations are trying to seek. So first on timeline, what the SRAC is recommending is for listed companies to start ISSB aligned reporting from FY 2025. And then 2 years later, it would be FY 2027 for non-listed companies, and this would be the larger companies above $1 billion in revenue. Then on the next pillar, that would be for reporting standards. So this would be aligned with the ISSB standards, and companies would have to focus on climate reporting as a start. So this would be S1 and S2. Then on external assurance, so this would take place at least 2 years after when mandatory reporting takes place. So for listed companies, this would be FY 27, and then for non-listed companies, this would be FY 29. And finally, on reporting and filing requirements, we would, the same requirements that apply for annual reports, for tabling at annual general meetings, would similarly apply to these companies when they file their sustainability reports. So this is a space that is still evolving. And the SRAC is a body that's formed with regulators, with industry professionals, with auditors, with the Big Four, and it's a collaborative approach where we try to see what is the best roadmap to introduce reporting in Singapore.
Much. Now, sorry, yeah. Thank you very much for that. No, I mean, it's excellent that you're progressing. You mentioned you closed the consultation recently. I understand that you will be putting together probably some final proposals, and this may be a combination of requirements coming from SGX as well as others coming from ACRA. Am I correct? You're nodding, which I take, that's yes. And probably starting in 2025, correct?
Yes, 2025 for listed companies.
So LISCO's starting in 2025, and gradually other companies will be subject to similar requirements later on.
That's right.
Right. Excellent. And we're actually pretty encouraged by the fact that you're considering S2 and S1 together. You mentioned you were starting with climate only, and I think Abigail mentioned probably yesterday or the day before that we are also considering whether to expand beyond climate at some point in time. But I guess that's still something that will need to review, will need to be reviewed at a later point in time. Correct? Excellent. Thank you very much for taking the lead here. And of course, you may be all a bit shy, but let's make this an interactive sort of session. And maybe, and thank you very much for the Singapore overview, I would like then to turn to our hosts here, OJK. So I'm not sure who may be perhaps willing to provide sort of an update. Nobby, can you, will you? Here, you can use this one.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll just give a brief introduction, and my colleague, both from OJK and also other institutions like accounting profession, maybe add to my introduction, because this is obviously a national agenda that we have to put together. So, answering your question previously, Yes, well, we haven't started considering the adoptions of the ISSB standard per se, but of course we are in the process of considering it. You know, we're thinking about, you know, your question, what, who, when, and where. You know, and maybe as a publicly listed company supervisor, I would say that we're thinking that maybe listed entities will be the first to adopt the standard, and maybe with, you know, the market tier, like you said, maybe the main board first, and then also private companies with certain assets. And in terms of where and when, maybe surely this is our thought that maybe we should adopt the gradual adoption for the industry, and also transition relief that we should give to them. And where, maybe currently the sustainability reporting under our jurisdictions is a part of annual report. It's not a separated report. We call it is a part of annual report, but I don't know, maybe later on, because we have this what we call comprehensive reporting task force under the Indonesian Accountant Association. Unfortunately, Ms. Rosita should be here with us, but he will join us later. She will join us later, and he can explain about the task force. And also, currently we I think the sustainability standard board already established by the Indonesian Accounting Associations, and also in the terms of assurance provider, I think Pak Hendang, would you like to add a little bit about the assurance for the sustainability report? But as you know, in our new omnibus law, we have this new committee for sustainability finance, that the committee has tasks in the 4 areas. You know, they have to set the policy development for sustainability finance, and to develop the basis data, and also the third is to develop product and also infrastructure, and the last one is to develop taxonomy. So it really, this is our thoughts, you know, at the operational level, because this is a very high committee, which is chaired by the Minister of Finance, consists of OJK, Central Bank, and also Ministry of Finance. But in the operational level, we thought that this committee will set the national policy for the sustainability finance development, including the sustainability reporting and the adoption of the ISSB standard. That's what we thought. Maybe my colleague can add. And also, we are in the process of discussing the draft for the government regulations of the establishment of the committee. Maybe my colleague Pak Jarod can add to this discussion. And also, I invite Pak Hendang for the assurance side. Thank you. Pak Jarod first.
Yeah, thank you. Just adding some information from Bu Novira said before. Yeah, actually, we are not starting from zero, Pak. because you know that we have already specific regulation regarding to sustainability report from 2017, and actually we have two specific report. The first one says sustainability report regarding to the disclosure concept, disclosure requirement, and then secondly, sustainable finance action plan. We are talking about what we call the business plans of sustainable finance for specific entities. The problem is we have the new omnibus laws, as Bu Indira said before, that we need to form the new sustainable finance committee. That the scope of the works, one of the committees is how to define and to set the standard of sustainability standard in this. Of course, we need to discuss more with Pak Hendang team from Accountant Association, right? Because you know that previously, you know that the standard bodies in Indonesia for accounting standards is in accountant, right? And then in omnibus laws also discuss about the subject or the entities that need to submit the sustainability reports, right? Actually, not only for the public listed company in Indonesia, but more broaden all of the financial sectors, business actors in Indonesia should submit sustainability reports. That's another problem, you know that. Because you know that actually we've identified some challenges, and we, what we call, make some gaps between our existing regulation, as I said before, POJK 51 2017, and this ISSB, right? And then you know that the big problem is about how to calculate the scope 3, right? And then how to what we call make the regulations that fit for all of financial sectors, business actors, as I said before, not only for listed company. And then we are also talking about the scenario analysis on there, and some big challenges that but we believe and we are on the right track, and we will discuss with accountant teams, Pak Andang teams, and also in the committee itself, right? Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you. I'm from Indonesian Institute of CPA, who are closely work with standard setters, such as IAI, who establish and adopt ISSB as the criteria for sustainability reporting preparation, and we are in the progress of preparing about the assurance providers, and we are using the guideline from IASB, including the ISA 3000 and 5000, because we are think that we are the right profession for giving the assurance on the sustainability reporting as an independent. So we are still in training and providing the guidance on that. So hope that we are closely working together with standards. But maybe our target is about, the gap is about 1 or 2 years from the international practice. We have also set up our task force, extended extra reporting, such as sustainability reporting or integrated reporting or ESG reporting, and work together with the task force of IAI, comprehensive corporate reporting. So in Indonesia, there's 2 national accounting bodies for doing the standard setters and the auditing issues. Yeah, maybe we try to keep 2 years gap. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. One question, if I may. I think you mentioned a comprehensive reporting task force that is being established. Is this a task force that will bring together all the relevant players in the ecosystem? So a bit reproducing like the structure that Singapore put together with the SRAC. So all those that may have an important say collectively thinking about the adoption roadmap going forward. I'm assuming right? Okay, excellent. So one thing I would like to offer is, of course, as you are putting together your thinking, this committee starts elaborating on all of these elements that you have mentioned, timelines, entities, the assurance framework. We, of course, stand ready to engage with you as necessary. And, we would like to have the opportunity to provide feedback. Please come and, consult with us as necessary. So let me just reiterate that.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Jonathan. So we hope early next year we will have the committee. So when we have meeting next year, then we will have a more clear jurisdiction pathway to adoption of the ISSB standard. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. This is very, very useful for us. And we're encouraged as well by the fact that you are considering already ISSB as the direction of travel, even though you're considering the elements surrounding that. So,
excuse me, Jonathan. This is the, let me introduce.
Yes.
We met before in Singapore, Bu Rusita. She's the chair of the Comprehensive Corporate Reporting Task Force, yeah, Bu, yeah? Okay. Yeah, we are in the middle of explaining our journey to adopt the ISSB standard. Would you like to share a little view, Bu? Okay, thank you.
So good morning, everybody. Apology, I'm coming late because of my health condition last night.
You have arrived just in time.
I'm okay now. Yeah. So I think in Indonesia we are so proud that we have already have a journey since 2020 for the new era of sustainability reporting. Since the discussion in the G20 about that we are going to the new momentum of sustainability reporting. We actually in the profession take initiative because we can see that the alignment between financial reporting and non-financial reporting is very, very crucial for the involvement of the accountant profession. We set up the task force. Therefore, the name is Comprehensive Corporate Reporting. If you remember the paper, yeah, the paper is actually not sustainability reporting at that time. Therefore, there are so many questions why your task force is not sustainability reporting task force, but comprehensive corporate reporting. That's an evidence that we start even before the name is becoming sustainability reporting, right? Because our vision is to drive all stakeholders at that time to sit together and see, bring the awareness of all the stakeholders to see the movement of this new era. That's the beginning of the task force. And the task force consists of many stakeholders. Aside from the 3 associations of accountant profession, we also include OJK, we also include Central Bank, we also include Ministry of Finance, which is a tax department. We also include the Kadin. Kadin is a economic, Chamber of Commerce, and also the CFO Club to represent the preparers. And also we include also the IDX, what else? Who else? Yeah, State-Owned Enterprise Ministry. So can you see that it's completely multi-stakeholders task force? And because of that, we can drive all the stakeholders to understand and bring the awareness of this issue. And we are happy to, maybe you already updated that we have the omnibus law now as the umbrella legal to drive this sustainability reporting. In Indonesian Institute of Chartered Accountants, we are in the selection process of the Sustainability Reporting Board, which also will comprise multi-stakeholders, which include the representative from the OJK, representative from the Ministry of Finance, representative of the Environment Ministry, which is very good. We can invite them because usually they are somebody who is quite far away from the Association of Profession. And also we include the preparers, academician, and also somebody who actually not accountant, but really involved in the sustainability from the NGO, something like that. So hopefully in the next 1 or 2 months, this board is going to be set up, and we are planning to have a collaboration with all the regulators to prepare a roadmap to implement the IFRS S1, S2, and also to think how to incorporate POJK 51 into that journey. So we do have our Indonesia new era of sustainability reporting. I think that's something that I can convey. Thank you.
Coming, yep, excellent. Now, thank you very much. So, brilliant. So it will be the Sustainability Reporting Committee that is being put together now, the one that will actually make the decision, taking feedback from all the elements in the ecosystem that you have mentioned that are contributing. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Excellent. Now that's really useful. So I would like to give the chance to other jurisdictions as well to present on their journeys. I don't want to call out on you if you don't feel like, so don't feel the compromise. But I know that maybe our colleagues from the Securities Commission of Malaysia may be interested in sharing perhaps some perspectives. And I know they have put together, I think, an interagency committee. So I think this model very much has extended in the region, which is, I think, a good way of bringing together all the different stakeholders. But again, I don't want to put you on the spot, and you can be brief if you wish, but feel free. A hand, yeah, microphone is coming.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, I'm reminded of the dinner we had a few nights ago where you sat next to our table. I was also called on on stage to say something, to do something, sorry. So perhaps just give a brief update on what's happening in Malaysia. So in May this year, Malaysia set up or established an advisory committee on sustainability reporting. So this is the membership is multi-regulatory. The chair is one of our managing directors. I mean, you've all met Datin Azalina. Datuk Kamaruddin is the other managing director of SCA. He's the chair of this advisory committee, and it's made up of participants from, of course, SC Malaysia, our central bank BNM, the stock exchange, Bursa, our companies commission, our audit oversight board, and also the Financial Reporting Foundation. So the purpose of the initialism of the ACSR, that's what we call it, is to look into enablers that would support the implementation of the ISSB standards in Malaysia. So of course, again, to clarify the language, it's to look into the enablers that would lead to that. This includes the approach and timeline of implementation, taking into account, of course, the market readiness for such implementation. So I think assurance matters are something that we are looking at as well, taking into account fears of greenwashing and so on. So the ACSR is currently doing its work. I think just like to mention as well that my colleague, Ms. Nadia, is also here today, and she's involved in the secretariat of the ACSR as well. So perhaps a bit of background as to, apart from this, Malaysia's own sustainability reporting standards. So this is mainly, carried out by Bursa, our stock exchange, and in 2022, these standards or these requirements were, I think, amended to better align them with global reporting standards, particularly the TCFD. And I think it's, well, one positive element is, the TCFD core principles also align with the ISSB. So I think it is a good step, and we hope to get further insights as to how we can progress with sustainability reporting. I think the ACSR right now is still considering these matters. So I suppose at this point in time I can't report on the timeline and what approach that the ACSR will be adopting. But it's just to report that we do have this this advisory committee already established looking into these matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We understand you may not be in a position to share expected timelines, but I think the fact that there are things in motion already, and the committee and all the considerations you're giving, I think sets you in the good direction. And again, let me just reiterate that same offer to all of you. We stand ready to engage with you. Again, this is very useful, and again, without pointing fingers at anyone, I know there's been a number of recent developments as well in Philippines, and I don't know whether Kelvin, SEC, you would like to share with us just some background. I can hand you the microphone. Yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan. So, for those who don't know me, I'm Kelvin. I'm with the Philippine SEC. I'm oddly enough one of the commissioners there, not oddly enough. But anyway, on a serious note, in relation to sustainability reporting, just a few updates. Just so you're aware, we have already implemented sustainability reporting as early as 2019, Memorandum Circular number 4. We did it on a comply-or-explain basis, and we recently made shifts to that. This year, we just came out with the updated sustainability reporting guidelines for public comment. The public comment period just ended, I think, just last week. Essentially, the latest version of the sustainability reporting guidelines, the draft ones, is already implementing Scope 1, Scope 2. So it aligns largely with the ISSB standards already. And in relation to that, there is an entity similar to SC Malaysia. There's an entity we call the PSRC, the Philippine Sustainability Reporting Committee. So it's a private sector, public sector grouping which comes up with the standards in relation to sustainability reporting. So those are the major considerations. The consultation period ended for our drafts just last week. We are now kind of reviewing the comments as I understand it. But we look to implement the new sustainability reporting guidelines, making mandatory some of the provisions already by Q4 this year. Well, technically we're Q4 already, I'm realizing. So this year. No, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelvin. Oh, that's coming very early then. We'll really remain connected and ensure we have a good overview of your final proposals after going through the consultation of your ESG guidelines.
Yep. Jonathan, one last thing. In case anyone sees it, it's the comment period technically has ended, but in case you still want to try and comment, we'd be happy to take it. Just be aware that the implementation period, at least to the mind of the commissioners, of the 5 of us who will vote on this, is that we want it done and we want it implemented certainly this year. So in case you want to jump in with some more comments, I would encourage you to do so quickly. Thank you.
And I understand that you have actually gone through this process to update the guidelines in order to incorporate Yes. The latest developments in ISSB, including IFRS 1 and IFRS 2.
Yes, correct. That was on purpose, precisely the point of including Scope 1 and Scope 2. We were also there in Singapore when the ISSB standards was launched in Singapore, June, I think. Was it June this year?
Right.
Unfortunately, I was in Singapore, but I was unfortunately unable to attend that. I had a separate speaking engagement, but we sent a very large delegation precisely with the intention for them to study it and to implement it in the latest draft that we have issued for public circulation and consultation. Thank you.
Excellent. Again, I'm looking around the room, and maybe we still have some time, but I would like to give you the chance to, again, share with us your perspectives. But I'll let you just put your hands up, see who wants to come next. Again, this is information sharing. I think it's useful for us. It's probably useful for the other ACMF members. So I don't know if anyone wants to follow, just put your hand up. We'll make sure you have a microphone. And please, if you can identify the jurisdiction you're speaking on behalf of. I don't see any hands up. One more chance. Over there. One volunteer. Thank you. Table 7.
Thank you, Pak. Actually, I just have a question aside of this ISB, but because we just launched about the carbon market, carbon market institution last month. I just curious about the purpose of for S1, S2 here. Considering the description of S1, S2, especially for the reference to science, it's referred to GHG protocol. It's kind of the end of this disclosure is about how to count the carbon issuance for each business industry or each business entities in each jurisdiction. Is it correct? What I'm perception like this one? And then the second one is there any further effort from this standard to journey for establish the carbon accounting? Something that one. Is it the correct one for me? Because sometimes it's kind of to implement this standard to its business as usual need more effort. But I just want to know about this one.
Thank you. So if I understand you well, it has to do with the implementation of the greenhouse gas protocol and the emissions carbon accounting framework that we have incorporated into IFRS 2, right?
Yeah.
Sure. And we understand, I mean, we're getting a lot of questions around this particular topic because we understand it is challenging for a number of institutions to put together that information. So again, I think our standard IFRS 2 considers the whole range scope 1, 2, 3 greenhouse gas emissions. And I think we are referencing the greenhouse gas protocol as one of the elements in order to determine the value chain upstream, downstream. And you know, we do understand the challenges, particularly on measurement of greenhouse gas emissions. And I think there is an overall provision that has to do with information that is readily available without incurring an undue cost and effort. And I think Jeannie was referring before to that before. And to the extent that there may be areas where measurement may be difficult, I think our standard already includes a measurement framework already orienting to proxies where you can actually rely on data that may be available, that maybe perhaps have been subject to a lower degree of verification. So I think there are elements to try to support that initial implementation. I don't know whether any of my colleagues, I know you have a bit of insights onto the carbon accounting GHG.
Very good question, and I'd like to share some of my own views. Actually, I'd call that connectivity between financial statements and the sustainability disclosure. Because something we call financial statements prepared in accordance with accounting standards have to follow a set of very, very rigorous rules based on some very fundamental assumptions. And most of the assumptions are sounds not so practical in real economy, right? So that means lots of things cannot be reviewed in your financial statements. For example, for any assets, if you want to find a record or make it to be included in your financial statements, it must satisfy 3 criteria. The first one is result from transactions happened in past. Second one, bring benefit in future, right? The last one can be measured reliably. Without any of them, you cannot account that into your financial statements. That means we missed a lot of information, maybe very useful, maybe required by investors in their process to make the investment decision. That's actually the same process to price companies' equity. That's very important. And a colleague of ours mentioned that financial and non-financial, 20 years ago, when people used term of notion of non-financial, actually they are highly probably not referring to the sustainability notions we talk about today. But I'd like to say, maybe the way we are using non-financial, this notion, 20 years ago, is a little different from the way we are using that today. Because in accordance with our standards, IFRS 1 and 2, when you talk about financial disclosure of sustainability related, actually we are talking about financial report, general purpose financial report, investor focused general purpose financial report. It includes sustainability related disclosure and financial statements. And 20 years ago, when we talk about non-financial, actually it's just beyond the scope of financial statements. Actually, most of them still, maybe highly probably still within the scope of what we are talking about today. Yeah, that's what I'd like to share.
Thank you, Bing. Any other questions? Hands up. Volunteers to share? Over there.
One of the aspects.
Can you please identify yourself and your jurisdiction?
I'm Ida from OJK.
Thank you.
I would like to ask about materiality, because in accountancy, materiality is interesting. And I saw materiality is one of the aspects that must be taken care. Can you give an example, maybe from Europe or from America, about the standard or the regulation that explaining materiality aspect? Is it only like EC1 5%, or do we have to make the curve and take the tail or whatever? Thank you.
Thank you. So I think our standard talks about the definition of materiality already, which, I think we're taking from the framework that is already available in ISSB, but it is not exactly like, say, the materiality approach that the assurance standard is going to cover. So there are 2 aspects here. One is the materiality approach that the reporting entity should follow in order to determine which sustainability risks and opportunities need to be disclosed. And I think there is certain guidance in the standard. There is then the materiality approach from an assurance provider perspective, which has to do, on the one hand, to assessing whether the reporting entity has applied the proper materiality assessment to determine risks and opportunities, but at the same extent, what is the weighting, the impact of that materiality assessment, whether it is something relevant or not. So there are probably two considerations here. One is, let's say, the order of magnitude. The other one is identifying which are the topics that actually investors are interested about. So we do have some guidance in that respect. I think this is a critical element that the IASSB is also considering as part of its assurance standard. So I think collectively we should be putting together some guidance to assist both preparers and assurance providers to go through that. I don't know whether I've answered your question. Not fully, it seems. You want to follow up?
Yes, you already give the framework, but because I'm a practical person, usually company will ask what is the maturity should we follow. So that's okay if you said it's already. I just ask for an example that's already implemented in one or two countries. Thank you.
I think our standards become effective 1 January 2024. So what we're putting together is, I was planning to talk about that later on. It's this transition implementation group, which will bring some of the questions that may have to do with some of these practical elements. I understand that the question of materiality will be a topic that will come across as something where I think that exchange of views between preparers and the ISSB will be helpful. I think our standards do already provide some elements. There's some guidance as well, but of course, except for a couple of pilot companies that are already starting to use our standards, these haven't become fully effective. So we still do not have the practical questions that have to do with the implementation of the standard. So I think this is something that's going to come across in the coming months. We believe that the TIG will be a critical element to try to provide a bit more clarity there. And we're cognizant that we need to provide educational materials which will further elaborate at the level of granularity on some of these elements. But in terms of the practical application, I think that's something that we will see once our standards start being used, probably as of January next year. Questions? Over there, table 13.
Hi everyone, I'm Grace from OJK. Jonathan, I want to ask you about the IFRS S1 and S2 transition relief. Point number 2, here is the climate first, where preparers can limit disclosure to climate-related information in first year. Here we have our regulation which obligate the listed companies disclose about how they handle the climate change. For this transition, I want to ask you, is that information is enough, or if it's not enough, then what is the scope of this disclosure? Because once again, related to IOSCO endorsement, the parameters is to science-based parameters such as GHG protocols or other measurements approach. Thank you.
Thank you. I think our standard reflects a requirement to disclose on transition targets and how the company is progressing to meet those targets. It doesn't fully articulate on elements that you may have seen as part of the transition plan task force, or I know that at the ACMF you have already developed further some additional guidance when it comes to transition planning. I think we are not proposing any particular transition planning framework, but we're asking companies to provide that information. I mean, in terms of the targets that have been set and how the company is progressing or meeting milestones with respect to those targets. In terms of the transition relief, I think there is no particular transition relief covering disclosures against transition targets. If no transition targets have been set, either because there's no particular regulation or policy already establishing that is a requirement that needs to be put in place, I think that is to be disclosed. But to the extent that the company has set transition targets, either because of a voluntary decision or either driven by policies, that is to be disclosed. But we're not establishing any particular framework as to what the transition planning model that should be followed. I think that is probably something that regulators and other bodies will want to chip in, and I think ACMF is already working in that space. We are, however, we're in contact with the TPT and other bodies that are working in this space, and this is one area where, based on the recommendations from IOSCO, but also the feedback we have received, we will be conducting, I think, further work to articulate in further detail. Thank you. I think we're running a bit out of time. I would like to just to share with you some elements that we are putting in place in order to support implementation. If we can turn to the slides, there is slide 30. So just some elements that are available to you as you're putting together your jurisdictional roadmaps. So one is, again, the establishment of the Transition Implementation Group, the TIG I was referring before, that is going to have a critical role in actually surfacing some of the implementation issues that preparers will face. And we think this body is going to be instrumental in, I think, driving consistency as well. So this group is going to meet in public. The agenda and the questions will be publicly available, so I think both regulators and preparers can benefit from that exchange. And it is a group that comprises different preparers from different regions. I think there are observers as well. IOSCO will be part of this group. And we think a lot of questions are going to be particularly helpful at these early stages when we are developing practice with respect to IFRS 1 and IFRS 2. Maybe, Jarlath, you may want to comment on some of the educational material that will be available. So there will be aspects such as materiality that we are cognizant that we need to provide a bit more guidance. Jarlath.
Is there a slide on this? Is there a slide on this or not? Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. The capacity building program is working with 35 partners around the world, national and international partners. We are working on a number of key resources and deliverables, including the development of a knowledge hub, which you can see on the slide. And the knowledge hub will go live in the next few weeks, and it's designed to provide a freely available set of resources to preparers, building on the success of the TCFD Knowledge Hub. It will contain curated content, which is designed to help preparers get ready for adoption. It's designed to showcase and point out examples of good practice and other guidance prepared by the Foundation with our partners and third parties also. It will also include an e-learning module in the near future. Next slide, please. That's it. Yeah. So the is that enough from the knowledge hub? Yeah, that should be enough.
Okay, thank you. And I know if we can turn to the previous slide as well. here. I know, Bing, the taxonomy is one of your favorite topics. You were talking about that before, so I don't know whether you want to spend just 1 minute talking about that.
Yes. To support the implementation of IFRS 1 and S2, we also working from a digital consumption perspective. The logic is quite like that. Because our standards focus on investors to satisfy investors' information need in their investment decision making. So how they use data? They need data machine readable. How to make your sustainability related information data into machine readable? By tagging. So what's the taxonomy? Somebody will tell you taxonomy is a dictionary of your business concepts. It's a dictionary for interface between human and machine computers. Yeah, actually, it's a set of rules to tag your data to make your disclosure machine readable. That's what taxonomy is. I'm talking about digital reporting taxonomy, not green finance taxonomy. That's different things. So that we are developing our proposed taxonomy, digital reporting taxonomy, and the issue that to invite public consultation and comments in 60 days is coming to an end. It came to an end, and we are doing some analysis on the common feedbacks, common letters we have got, and we are planning to finalize our taxonomy and publish that in the first half of next year.
Thank you, Bing. So these are all resources that are either already available or are in train, and I think we believe this will provide another layer of support towards implementation. So before closing, I just wanted to go through the next slides, just to give you sort of a sense as well of how the ISSB is taking feedback from different bodies and incorporating that into our due process and the way we develop standards. I was talking before about the TIG, so probably nothing else to add. I think there will be a meeting already on 21st of November, so that's coming pretty soon. And again, that is a group that will be operating in public, so that information will be available. If we can move to the next slide, please. This is another important advisory group for the ISSB. It's the Sustainability Standards Advisory Forum. So for those perhaps more familiar with accounting standards, it's a bit of the equivalent of the ASAF. And again, it's a group of national sustainability standard setters, and they do meet regularly. And it's a key source, I think, of input for the ISSB. We can move, and I think they will be meeting again probably next week in Frankfurt, so we're looking forward to that. Next slide, please. So the jurisdictional working group, again, this is a group that combines different regulators. IOSCO is there. I think Jeannie was referring to that. And it is working on different elements, including interoperability. But again, I think it will be instrumental, again, in trying to support us as we encourage and promote adoption of our standards. So again, they're meeting next week. Next slide, please, and I'll finish there. It's the Sustainability Consultative Committee, which is a group bringing together different multilateral bodies. The IMF, the UN, World Bank, OECD are there, and they are trying to provide, again, views on interdependencies between different matters. So as we progress, I think, towards defining our work plan for the next few years, I think this is a group that can provide critical input. I'll stop here, and it's probably time to close before we go for lunch. Let me just note, it has been very valuable for us to hear as well from your thoughts. We understand some of you are in the early phase of considering the introduction of ISSB standards. We hope that the adoption guide overview that we published in June already sets you in at least able to give some consideration to some elements that you can build into your jurisdictional programs. We will be working towards publishing an adoption guide later on this year, so stay tuned. That's something that's coming very soon. And just reiterate the message that we remain ready to engage with you bilaterally. If you want to come to us, have questions on particular approaches, that will be very useful. And again, I think just building from the initial messages, I think we're all in the journey to trying to enhance transparency, strengthen capital markets, give opportunities to your corporates to be able to raise capital, elevate as well the soundness of ACMF capital markets. We were talking, I think, yesterday in one of the panels about the scorecards. I think being able to meet international best standards, I think is a critical consideration in order to bring or elevate, I think, the standing of some of the markets, which facilitates in turn as well the ability of corporates to raise capital. So we hope you found that useful. I think you probably have our contact details. If any of you has any questions, please come, approach us throughout the day. I think our emails will be available. And again, thank you very much for your cooperation. It has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the training session has concluded. I think let's give a round of applause to all the experts and all of us. Yes, thank you. So before leaving the room, I'd like to remind you that lunch is available in Don Bu restaurant. So yeah, that's about the session today. Please enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you have some time to enjoy the beauty of Bali. So, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi Santi Om. Thank you very much.